Hey everyone, welcome back to Stories About Entitled People. Today we're lining up 3 stories that all answer the same question. What happens when someone tries to assign responsibility that was never theirs to give? A parent tried to outsource parenting, a town tried to enforce a rule it forgot existed, and an HOA tried to regulate someone who had already found a bigger rule book. Let's compare the exact moment each power play stopped working. Here we go. My mom treats me like her on-call errand boy, then blamed me when it finally blew up. My parents have been divorced for years, and I'm their only kid. I'm 16 and I do the normal split custody thing. 1 week with my mom, 1 week with my dad, back and forth like a human ping pong ball. My dad's still single, my mom remarried, and her husband came with a 10-year-old daughter, so now I've got a stepsister too. I'll just say it straight, my relationship with my dad is better. At his house, I'm treated like a person. At my mom's, I'm treated like a roaming set of hands. She's always been demanding, but the older I get, the more she acts like having a teenager means she gets an assistant she doesn't have to pay. One of her favorite things is texting me during school and expecting me to answer immediately. Not when you get a chance, not after class, immediately. Like I'm sitting around waiting for assignments for mission control instead of trying to pass algebra. She'll send stuff like, pick up milk on your way home, or I ordered takeout, go get it, or walk your stepsister home, or take her to this. And it's always framed like it's already decided and I'm just being informed of my duties. It got bad enough that my dad and even some of my teachers told me, put your phone on silent during the school day. You're in class. This is not reasonable. So I did. I told my mom straight up, my phone is on silent until I'm done with school. I wasn't even rude about it. I tried to keep it simple because apparently anything more than one sentence turns into a debate. She did not take it well. At one point, she actually called the school. Not to report bullying, not to discuss grades. She called the school to complain that I wasn't texting her back. Like the office was supposed to send someone into my classroom and be like, your mother needs you to respond to her right now. I wish I was joking. I'm not. The worst part is that it's never an emergency. It's milk, it's food, it's errands, it's be at this place at this time and handle my problem. She doesn't care if I'm in the middle of a test. She doesn't care if I'm in a lab. She doesn't care if I'm presenting. She acts like school is just some optional hobby I do until she needs me. Since she got remarried, a lot of it started revolving around my stepsister. Because I don't drive, helping always means walking. Walk to the store, walk to pick her up, walk to wherever she's at. I've stood outside my stepsister's basketball practice for an entire hour before because my mom insisted I needed to be there to pick her up, even though I wasn't the parent. I didn't agree to it, and I wasn't even told ahead of time like a normal person would do if they expected someone to be responsible for a child. Then April happened. I had after-school stuff going on, nothing shady, nothing dramatic, just the normal kind of school activities that are scheduled, planned, and not optional. I had my phone on silent like I'd been doing, and I didn't check it because I didn't feel like dealing with my mom texting me a grocery list while I was busy. I figured I'd see whatever it was when I was done, like a normal person. When I finished and finally checked my phone, there was a stack of messages from my mom. First, you need to pick your stepsister up from her Girl Scouts camping thing. Then a missed call. Then a voicemail where my mom was screaming so loud I had to pull the phone away from my ear after the first few seconds. She was yelling that they got a call. My stepsister had been knocked down by a bike, she was at the hospital, and how could I not answer? How could I do this? What was wrong with me? All of it. I went to my mom's house and no one was there. So I did what I always do. I went to my room, started my homework, and waited. I didn't have a car. I didn't have a ride. I didn't even fully understand what she expected me to do at that moment besides stand there and absorb blame. A few hours later, my mom finally came home. She looked exhausted, furious, and ready to explode. She didn't sit down. She didn't ask how my day was. She didn't even start with, we had a scare. She went straight into accusation mode. She told me my stepsister had walked on her own because nobody came to pick her up. She said she was too young to walk alone. She said she wasn't being careful. And she said it like it was the final, undeniable conclusion. That's why she got hit. I remember blinking at her because I genuinely didn't know how she expected me to react to that. I said, I didn't even agree to pick her up. I was at school stuff. My phone was on silent. You know that. That's the whole thing right there. You didn't agree. She just assumed. It's like she left a note on the fridge and thinks that's the same as making a real plan. My mom lost it. She snapped that I should be ashamed of myself, that I should feel horrible, that I should be crying, that I should be more upset, like she was grading my emotional reaction and I was failing the assignment. She kept repeating, "This is family." Like that one word magically erases schedules, responsibilities, and the fact that I'm not the parent. I told her again, I'm sorry she got hurt, but it's not my fault you decided I was picking her up without asking me. That somehow made her even angrier. She started going on about how family should take priority over any school stuff, which is honestly insane because the whole reason I'm at school is to build an actual future, not to be a free courier service for her household. She then turned it into a whole war with my dad. She chewed him out for supporting the phone on silent thing and siding with the school. My dad chewed her out for blaming me and trying to dump adult responsibilities onto a teenager. That part was satisfying, not because I like drama, but because someone finally said out loud what I'd been thinking for a long time. Now, every time I'm at my mom's house, it's like walking into a constant argument that never ends. She brings it up constantly. She tells me I'm disgusting for defending myself. She says I have no empathy. Her husband is fully on her side, which is not surprising because he benefits from my mom turning me into the built-in helper instead of him actually doing more parenting. My stepsister's injuries were serious. She broke a leg and her other knee is damaged enough that it might be long-term. That part sucks, and I do feel bad that she got hurt. I'm not mad at her. She's 10. She doesn't make the rules in that house. But I don't feel guilty for something I never agreed to. I wasn't the one who planned her pickup by sending a text into the void and calling it handled. I wasn't the one who assumed a teenager would magically materialize at the right place, at the right time, without confirmation, without a ride, without even checking whether I was available. If they needed her picked up, they should have arranged it like parents, especially since they're the adults who chose to sign her up for an activity in the first place. My mom keeps saying it's disgusting that I keep defending myself. What's actually disgusting is treating your kid like an unpaid employee, refusing to respect basic school boundaries, and then blaming him when your lack of planning finally catches up with you. It's wild that she's mad at you for not being a parent when she's the one who didn't act like one. A text isn't a babysitter. She wanted you to do the job, but she didn't want to do the work of actually asking or making sure it would happen. And our second story. A forgotten law helped us escape a ticket. Mike was an old coworker of mine, and this story came from his teenage years, somewhere in the late 1950s or early 1960s. He grew up in a town so small it barely qualified as a dot on a map. One traffic light, one gas station, a diner, a post office, a couple of other buildings, and a library. That library will matter later. Like most bored teenagers with access to cars and nowhere to go, Mike and his friends spent a lot of time driving around just to kill time. The nearest big town was an hour away, so their entertainment options were limited. One evening, out of sheer boredom, they decided to hang out at the library. Not because they loved books, but because it was air-conditioned, quiet, and free. At some point, one of them pulled an old town law book off the shelf, the kind that collects every ordinance ever passed, including the ones everyone forgot about decades ago. They flipped through it mostly as a joke, laughing at outdated language and weird rules that clearly belonged to another era. Eventually, they closed the book, left the library, and went home. That night, they took their cars out and started cruising around town. Nothing reckless. They stayed under the speed limit, followed traffic laws, and didn't do anything dangerous. But they were loud, not shouting or blasting music, just driving around repeatedly, looping through streets, circling blocks, generally being a nuisance in a town where absolute silence after dark was the norm. About an hour into it, the town's one and only sheriff pulled them over. He wasn't amused. He wrote them tickets for disturbing the peace and handed them a summons to appear in court. The guys took the tickets, went home, and waited for their court date. On the day of the hearing, they stood in front of the judge, a no-nonsense man Mike referred to only as Judge J. The judge read through the citations and looked unimpressed. He asked how they pleaded. Mike had been elected spokesperson for the group, mostly because he was the calmest under pressure. He cleared his throat and said, "Your Honor, my friends have elected me to speak on their behalf. Before we enter a plea, may I ask a question?" The judge raised an eyebrow but nodded. "Go ahead." Mike asked, when we enter our plea, may we explain why we did what we did? That seemed to catch the judge's interest. Yes, he said, you may explain. Mike nodded. In that case, Your Honor, for the charge of disturbing the peace, we plead guilty. The judge paused, surprised. You're pleading guilty? Yes, sir, Mike replied. We did disturb the peace. The judge leaned back slightly. Then why do I get the feeling there's more coming? Mike didn't miss a beat. Because while we're guilty of disturbing the peace, we believe we were acting in accordance with town law. The room went quiet. The sheriff frowned. The judge leaned forward again. I'm going to need you to explain that. Mike said, Your Honor, what we did is actually required by an ordinance currently on the books. The judge stared at him. Come again? There's a law, Mike said calmly, that applies to automobiles operating at night. Now the judge looked irritated. Son, if you're about to tell me you found some loophole in the law, I suggest you be very careful. Mike nodded respectfully. Of course, sir. That's why I'd like the court to verify it. The judge turned to the clerk. Go to the library and bring me the town law book, the old one. A few minutes later, the clerk returned carrying a thick, dusty volume and placed it on the bench. Mike asked permission to approach, flipped through the pages carefully, and stopped. Here, Your Honor, he said, pointing. The judge read silently. His expression changed, confusion first, then disbelief. He read it again. The ordinance stated that all horseless carriages operating at night must drag 8 feet of logging chain with lengths no smaller than 3/4 of an inch behind the vehicle. The courtroom stayed quiet. Finally, the judge closed the book and set it aside. He looked at the sheriff, then back at the group of teenagers. Charges dismissed, he said. The boys visibly relaxed, but the judge wasn't finished. He fixed them with a hard stare. Don't ever do this again. Mike opened his mouth, probably to say something about the law still being valid. The judge cut him off, because it won't be in that book next time. And according to Mike, by the end of the week, that ordinance was quietly removed. The town went back to being silent at night, the law got updated, and a group of bored teenagers managed to beat a court case using nothing but patience, an old library book, and the judge's willingness to admit the town had forgotten its own rules. There's something very another era about this whole story. Kids roaming around at night, one sheriff, one courtroom, and a law book thick enough to stop a door. Today, this probably turns into a social media circus. But back then, it was just a weird local moment everyone remembered for years. And let's be honest, every town has that one outdated rule nobody notices until the exact wrong person reads it. Mike and his friends just happened to be curious enough to flip a few pages. And our last story. My dad's HOA tried to fine away his American flag. In 2015, my dad bought a house in a neighborhood with an HOA, which is how I learned that some people willingly pay extra money each month for the privilege of being supervised by retired hall monitors with a clipboard fetish. My dad was about 50 at the time, and I don't think he'd even lived under an HOA before. He's the kind of patriotic guy who actually means it, not the I slap a sticker on my truck and call it a personality kind. Growing up, I genuinely can't remember a single home we lived in that didn't have a flagpole out front. Not one. There was always a flag, usually flowers around the base and a big spotlight aimed at it so it could stay up in the rain and through the night without anyone whining about etiquette. So when he moved into this new place, he did what he's always done. He put up a flagpole in the front yard, neat, sturdy, lit properly, the whole classic dad setup. It looked good, honestly. It wasn't some tacky thing flapping off a busted porch rail. It was a proper pole planted like it belonged there. The HOA lost their minds. He got a letter, then another, then a violation notice, then a fine. Apparently, the issue wasn't the flag itself. At least they didn't want to say that part out loud. The issue was that the pole wasn't approved, or it didn't match the neighborhood aesthetic. Or it was placed without permission, or whatever phrase they thought sounded least like, we don't like you. My dad did not take this well. He tried the normal route at first. He went to meetings, he asked for the rule in writing, he asked what part of it was non-compliant, he asked what a compliant pole looked like. The answers were the usual HOA soup. Vague, self-important, and delivered with the tone of someone denying you access to the kingdom. Then my dad escalated into his favorite hobby, righteous public annoyance. He started posting on the community bulletin board, not little polite notes either, full-on paragraphs about how ridiculous it was that someone could be told they couldn't display the American flag on American soil. And when I say posting, I mean he wrote like he was preparing a closing argument. You could practically hear an eagle screeching in the background. At one point, he rented a full-page ad in the local paper. I wish I was exaggerating. A full-page ad in black and white telling the entire town, everyone flipping through the paper for coupons and high school football scores, that the HOA leadership were giant pieces of crap for finding someone over a flagpole. That's not me paraphrasing, that was the vibe, and the language was not gentle. It was the kind of thing that makes you whisper, "Dad, no," while also being unable to stop laughing because you know exactly how committed he is. The HOA responded the only way HOAs know how: more fines. So my dad paid them, monthly, for 2 years. Not because he agreed, but because he's stubborn and he wanted the paper trail. He'd slap the check down like, "Here's your little penalty, now watch me still not move the flag." During those 2 years, he got a weird amount of support from service members who lived in the neighborhood. A couple of them apparently showed up to meetings, politely asked why the HOA was choosing this hill to die on, and made it very clear they weren't impressed. Eventually, the HOA backed off. Quietly. No apology, of course. They just stopped charging him like they hadn't spent 2 years acting like the flagpole was a biohazard. That should have been the end of it. But here's the thing about my dad. Once he knows you tried to control him, he doesn't relax, he gets creative. Somewhere in the middle of that war, he found out about a loophole involving ham radio operators. I don't know all the legal details, but the short version is federal rules give licensed amateur radio operators certain protections that can override HOA restrictions in specific cases. The government, shockingly, is not moved by a neighborhood committee's feelings about visual clutter. And my dad has always loved a loophole. This man had owned a CB radio in his conversion van when I was a kid. It was mostly for road trips because he liked the idea of being able to talk to other drivers and feel like a trucker for 5 minutes. He had never, at any point in his life, been a serious ham guy. No equipment, no hobby room, no radio buddies, nothing. But the second he realized there was a regulation that would let him put something in his yard that the HOA couldn't easily swat down, he became, overnight, extremely interested in amateur radio. Not, "I'll buy a little setup and learn." No, my father went straight for the nuclear option. He put up a massive radio antenna in the front yard right next to the flagpole. Not a subtle one, not a tasteful one. You can see it from space one. A 150-foot antenna in the front yard, next to the flag. The absolute scale of this is what makes it. He didn't just find a loophole, he made sure everyone for miles could see it. This isn't a small act of defiance, it's a monument to it, built right next to the monument they started the war over. The HOA showed up like someone had set their office on fire. They delivered a statement to his house, and I swear I've never seen someone so angry holding a clipboard. The guy looked like he was going to start vibrating through the driveway. He was talking fast, pointing at the antenna like it had personally insulted his mother. My dad stood there listening, perfectly calm, hands on his hips, nodding like he was taking feedback on a landscaping project. And then he smiled. Not a friendly smile, not a howdy neighbor smile, a slow, smug, satisfied grin that said, "You pushed me for 2 years, and now you get to look at this every day." The HOA guy finally snapped something like, "This is unacceptable." And my dad, without missing a beat, goes, "Federal regulation, you can write it up if you want, but you'll just be decorating your files." Then he thanked him for stopping by, like the man had just dropped off a package. After the HOA guy left, my dad turned back to the yard, looked at the flag, looked at the antenna, and said, "Now it's perfect." Honestly, I hate HOAs so much I almost saluted. All 3 stories are about refusing to be controlled by unreasonable authority. While the teen's boundary setting is vital and the law book loophole is clever, story 3 wins for its sheer monumental commitment. The dad didn't just win, he built a 150-foot-tall trophy for his victory. It's a lesson in creative, lawful escalation that transforms petty tyranny into public art. Hey guys, thank you all for watching the video. I'll see you in the next one.